File select. Stage select.
Okay. I wonder if you can hear me now. Or if I'm gonna have to restart things again. I guess you'll let me know as soon as you can. Ooh, I see my mic moving. So that's a good sign. I apologize about the extremely repetitive music right now. Okay, it looks to me like we're good. Alright, good, good. Alright, excellent. I set this up yesterday and then I unplugged the mic so I could, like, record something onto an external hard drive. And then I forgot to plug the mic back in when I started the stream, so thank you very much for pointing that out. I saw somebody say that, that, like, watching my stuff had gotten them into the Sonic and Metroid series, and that's really cool. I always really appreciate comments like that. Anyway, what I was babbling on about when the mic wasn't plugged in and nobody could hear what I was saying was that, like, this is something that I've wanted to do for a really long time, is, like, after, like, shortly after an episode comes out, do sort of like a post-episode, like, follow-up stream, where I can talk about the production of the episode and just answer questions and interact directly with you guys. And I always say I always want to do it, and then I always just kind of put it off, or I guess with streams, I feel like the reason that the majority of people, like, subscribe to me and watch my content, you know, it isn't, like, for gameplay streams, and it isn't because of stuff like this. But, like, I feel like this is something where, like, hopefully, like, it's a little more in line with my content. It's sort of like a bonus extra follow-up to it. And I'm excited to do this. I've wanted to do this for a long time, and I hope it goes well, assuming that I can remember to plug the mic in. So basically what I'm doing right now is just, and it's a good thing, I'm just sort of like running this right now to test things out, make sure that there aren't any technical issues, and then I plan to do like a live commentary over the episode. Like basically just run the video footage of the episode, talk about it, talk about when it do it, talk about some behind the scenes stuff. And then after that, I'll go back to gameplay. I'll answer your questions about the episode and about the Dreamcast and about just anything tangentially related to it, I suppose. And might also hop online and play some PSO or some Chu Chu Rocket, and it should be a good time. I saw somebody ask if this was on an emulator, and no, it's not. Typically, I wouldn't care so much, but like with the way that the Dreamcast episode was structured in particular, I thought it was really important to like get, you know, genuine, get all my video off of the genuine hardware, because so much of that is just like steeped in my nostalgia for the console itself. Whereas normally, with most episodes, I prioritize like let's make it look as good as possible. But okay, everything's looking pretty good. It's very difficult to... Well, I guess I can just hold forward right now and I can look at the chat. A lot of people asking about, like, what... you know, would you ever critique this game? Would you ever critique that game? Like, I don't mind answering those questions, but, like, right now I kind of just want to keep it to questions, like, about the Dreamcast and about the episode. Somebody asked, what's your favorite console of all time? And I answered that in the episode. That is the Dreamcast.
That was cool.
Somebody asked, have I done voice training? No, I just talk like this. Although, funny enough, I did once have a job as a telemarketer. Well, I wasn't a telemarketer. I was working for the fire department, technically, and I was calling, asking people to, like, make donations to the fire department. But everyone would hang up on me immediately because I've got, like, I guess too much of a radio voice. So I didn't last long at that job. But okay, it looks like everything's going pretty well. I'm going to shut this off. I'm just going to do that. Hopefully, I don't think the sound will come through. And this is when I stop playing Sonic Adventure 2. Yeah. Alright, so let's see how I'm going to do this exactly. And like I said, I'll take questions about like more specific questions after I do the commentary track for it. Although I did say, as an adult, do you have more of an appreciation for the PS2? I mean, yeah, obviously. Like I said in the episode, like it became basically a must-own console just by the ridiculous breadth of the library. Like there were so many. Like I would go into game stores and there was just so many things that I really, really wanted to play that were only on the PS2, and that's just down to like how incredibly successful it was. So yeah, and I mean I definitely had some really great times with the PS2. All right, let me pull the episode up here. And let me get it on this screen. Okay, if I've done things right, you guys should now see the episode. So I'm going to mute it because, believe me, I know from experience that trying to listen to somebody talk over themselves is really irritating, so I figure I'll just have it muted. I want to make sure that you guys can hear, or if you guys are seeing this, then we'll go ahead and get going. Such professional, much wow. Okay, I'm gonna guess we're good. So, here we go. Wait. I unmuted it. Alright, now we're going to go. So yeah, so the episode opens with something I haven't done too much of in quite a while, and that's like actual live footage. If you, like, I tend to think of my series in a chronological way. If you look at what I was doing from the Sonic Adventure episode up until I started the Metroid series, like I was trying to incorporate a lot more live action footage, and there was actually a version of the Metroid script where I was going to appear on camera like I had been lately. And then I guess, I don't know, I felt like me appearing on camera was kind of distracting from like the point of the episode, so I don't do it as much anymore. It was a fun experiment, and I'm not saying I'll never do it again, but I felt like it was making things a little bit too focused on like, I guess, being more of a personality-driven series than what I really wanted it to be. So I stopped doing that so much. I mean, I think that stuff works really well if you're doing something a little bit more, like, comedy-focused, but that's not necessarily what I tend to angle for. Although, hey, I guess I do appear on... I guess I do appear in this episode, technically. So that footage right there, that is actually footage that I shot in 2001 of me babbling on and on about how much I liked Virtua Fighter 2. And this footage here is Kalen, who some of you might remember from the Let's Play days, absolutely kicking my butt by spamming the B button over and over again. He's 5 years younger than me, so at the time, you know, I was 13 and he was 8, and I got really, really salty about getting beaten by an 8-year-old like that. But he got a kick out of it when I told him that I was actually going to include that in the episode. So, when I'm sort of brainstorming what I want an episode to be, especially when it's something like this where, like, I've watched every Dreamcast retrospective video that I've ever come across. I had one at the time, and it's something that I know a lot about. I always try to think of what are some things that I could bring that's unique to me. What could I bring that's unique to the discussion? What are some things that I could say that I don't see have been said before? And with the Dreamcast, I mean, that was really obvious, because I feel like a lot of the retrospectives that I've seen have been sort of through the lens of have been a little bit more objective, haven't been so so unceasingly emotional like mine was here. Like, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's so much, like, there's nothing wrong with, like, making a video about a subject like this. And I mean, the Dreamcast, like, failure in and of itself is a really, really fascinating, like, historical subject, and I understand why people do it like that. But knowing that I had, like, a lot personally invested in the console when I was a kid, and how much it meant to me, I knew that that's what I wanted to bring to the episode. So that's sort of the angle I took. I wanted to, and then what really got me set off writing the script is exactly what you see in the thumbnail of the episode, and that's, so you never had a Dreamcast. Because I got to thinking about it, and I got to thinking about how weird it must seem to people who didn't grow up with Sega, who were too young to remember them, or who just skipped the Dreamcast, like, how it must seem to them that this console that lasted such a short period of time, like, people like me never shut up about how great it was, and how great the games were, and how great the library was, and how ahead of its time it was. And I can see it being the case now. I mean, a lot of games of this era, like, relative the earlier 3D games. Oh, by the way, you can see the Virtual Boy right there making a cameo appearance in the reflection of the Nomad screen, because I have the Virtual Boy proudly on display in my office. Speaking of failed game consoles. But anyway, the Dreamcast is something that I think gets talked about in reverent tones, but I can see it being the case that if you didn't, like, you could go back to it now, and a lot of those games haven't aged the best. And that's nothing like unique to the console itself. It's just kind of a factor of how ambitious and forward-thinking, like, 3D games had to be at that time in order to just make the leap to 3D, and how much how much the industry was expanding. So to go back and play it now without the context of what it was like at the time is, I'm sure, a very different experience from what it was actually like to, like, experience this stuff firsthand when it was new. So I kind of wanted to bring that kind of perspective to it as much as I could. So production for this episode started back in, like, admittedly, I knew I was going to do an episode about the Dreamcast going all the way back to 2015. When I first opened up the Patreon, I would let people, like, sponsor episodes and say, okay, so you can tell me which game or which console I'm going to do an episode about. And I quickly dropped that when I realized that I'm really, really, really bad about actually getting anything like done in a timely fashion. So I stopped that pretty fast just because I felt bad, and nobody ever complained. Nobody ever said, hey, you need to hurry up with this. But I personally felt bad for how long it was taking. But properly, production of the episode started back in January, when I started writing the script. And then what really took a long time with this one were a couple of things. For one, I moved, and I had no idea how, like, I underestimated how long that would take. And for another thing, so this episode is about 25 minutes long, and this is probably the worst, and by the way, yes, that is a cat, and I'll talk about her in a second. This is the worst, like, time... This is, like, the worst... I'm not sure how to put it. This is the worst time ratio I've ever had. I worked longer and harder on this episode to make it 25 minutes, probably than I did on the hour-long Other M episode. But that's because of a couple of factors. For one thing, I knew that the guy who sponsored it had been waiting for it since 2015, and I knew that, I hadn't had an episode properly come out since, like, the 2017 countdown, so I felt a lot of pressure to, like, just get a really, really great episode out and make... I think when it's been a while, I always feel the pressure to, like, okay, let's make this a really great one. But also just because the Dreamcast was something very... very special to me, and I wanted to do it justice, and I knew that there was a way that I could talk about it, and the way that I could portray it, and the way that I could hopefully explain to people why there is such an appreciation for it, and I wanted to make really, really certain that I did that right. So, I mean, I don't know if who's listening, like, follows me on Twitter, but you can, like, see me over the weeks go, okay, so the script was probably good enough a week ago, but I'm still polishing it. Just because I really, really, really wanted this to be a good one. So, talking about, so let's see, what have I missed while I've been babbling on? The Sonic Adventure vinyl that you guys saw a minute ago. That was, was never, like, a big vinyl guy, but I ordered that on a whim, and I was like, okay, I was not expecting this to be as cool as it was. And then while I was trying to get that shot of it spinning, of course, my cat was very, very fascinated by the record. I see somebody's asked which VGA box I used. I actually used a... there's no VGA box, it's just a cord that plugs, like, directly into the back of the Dreamcast and goes to VGA. Somebody says the video is a little bit choppy. I'm not seeing that on my end, but I guess that would probably be because I'm actually streaming this off of my laptop, because I wanted to, the Dreamcast is set up in the living room again. When I was recording footage for it, I filmed it in the office, but needed to use the laptop down here. Somebody says, quality over quantity, and that's what I always aspire to. So... Anyway, Sonic Adventure is a game that I think my affection has grown for a lot over the years, and I'm sure I'll talk about that, like, as we go on here. PSO, though, I don't know if I got any of you guys with the fake out, where I was building up the online game, and then I abruptly switched to talking about Chu Chu Rocket. A lot of this footage is actually from PSO Blue Burst. Just because that's the one that my friends and I still play. That's like a PC port of PSO. And then this is genuine Dreamcast footage you see here when I'm by myself. But nonetheless, I tried to make PSO on the PC look, I smushed it down to 4:3 and made it a smaller aspect ratio. What you're seeing there is us torturing Kalen by saying, "Yo, Kalen," so he'll heal us. And we actually made, like, our own, like, voice, there's these things called symbol chat, and we use those and spam him whenever we're down on health at all. So, it's really fascinating to me to think about the fact that, like, I had these friends, like, in PSO, and, we spent, like, a lot of time together hanging out in the lobbies and talking to each other, and, I never, like, knew their real names, and I never talked to them in real life, and I think it's really strange how you can do that in video games, and PSO is by no means, like, the only time I've had an experience like that in online games. It's just, it's funny how, I mean, I guess it's a little easier nowadays because, how social media works now, but back then you could spend hundreds of hours hanging out with people and talking to them and never actually know who they are. And then you lose connection, and you always kind of wonder what happened to them, which is why I threw the thing in there about, like, saying, hey, so if Spidey is still out there. So at one point, like, I knew right off the bat that I didn't want this episode to be, like, structured the same way as my N64 retrospective, where I ran down every single game I had for the system. I decided to focus a little bit more on the history of the Dreamcast and about my experiences with it, and less on, let's just boom, 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 run down every single game. And then, so I picked, like, a couple of defining games, PSO, Sonic Adventure, Shenmue, and I wasn't going to go into too much depth about a whole lot else, although I definitely wanted to allude to it. And then, like, so I had the script ready, like, in that way, and then I played Crazy Taxi, I played Seaman, and I'm like, okay, I actually have a little bit more to say about those. about these things. Like, especially playing Seaman, like, I think I kept skipping the clock forward to get them to advance faster. And I was just like, okay, there's a lot, like, that I can sort of highlight about this very, very, very strange game. Like, I was a little surprised by how much it sucked me in. And then I also knew that I wanted to talk about Typing of the Dead here, and the second player playing with me here is Alicia, who some of you might remember from the Other M episode, talking about the bird dad. She was worried that everybody was going to know what a what a bad typist she was because of this. And here in a minute, I make a reference to, like, when I start to talk about football. Like, it's always been so strange to me how the Dreamcast had all these quirky titles. It had all these very, like, strange, unique titles, and then I also played a lot of, like, sports sims on it. Like, the one that I didn't bring up here was like the NBA games, but I remember renting like the NHL games. And a big part of that, I mean, for one thing, Sega sports games were always just very, very arcadey. They were always very easy to pick up and play. Like, even if you didn't know anything about the sport, it was easy enough to have a good time with them. But it was also just like how special online was at the time. Like, that's another one of those many things about it that, you know, you take for granted nowadays, because of course a sports game is going to have online now. But back then, just, you know, being able to play NFL 2K1 and cream for meatheads you've never even met. And that's a reference to the SegaNet commercial, by the way. But that was something really, really, really cool. I think I did a good job in choosing shots here to highlight how good, like, how comparatively a step up Shenmue's graphics really were, and how far we came in such a short time. Although I wanted, like, I recognized that I wasn't going to be able to show much footage of the game, especially of characters talking to each other, without addressing, like, how strange and uncanny a lot of it is. The Dreamcast was so unique that you played sports games, yeah. So, in the when I was working on the script, Kovar pointed out, Kovar, who some of you might remember hating in the Metroid Fusion episode, like, he highlighted the entire section on Shenmue and pointed it out that it was more than twice as long, that I talked about Shenmue for more than twice as much time as I did any other game, and just, like, how much of the script it was taking up. And, like, I wasn't surprised when he pointed that out, but I decided that I didn't want to cut it down too much, because I think that talking about it and going into this level of detail on it sort of highlights, like, my big point about Shenmue being this very defining Dreamcast game. And I wish that at the end of this section I had made it... I feel like it's a little... it's not quite as cohesive as I wanted it to be at the end of this section when I say, you know, Sega was more interested in making something groundbreaking than making something profitable, and then I go directly from that into the very sad section talking about the Dreamcast's failure. But that was sort of why I wanted to go into so much detail on Shenmue, because I feel like more than anything else, I said a minute ago about how playing these games now doesn't give you the full context of what it was like to play them then, and I think Shenmue, more than anything else, is a great example of that. Like, that shot where I'm, like, moving through the online menu, where you can see everybody's name and you can see everybody's, like, blood type and birth date, like, the amount of detail in this game is still ridiculous. Like, when I was recording this part, well, not this, when I was recording Rocking Around the Hazuki household and opening drawers and taking off picture frames, like, I was finding things that I could interact with that I had even forgotten about, like being able to pick up all of the pots and stuff in the kitchen. Like, there's no reason that you need to be able to do that, but Shenmue was just very much trying to be this accurate simulation of the real world. and to let you, like, give you that kind of, like, detail. But it is not surprising, and I always think about Shenmue and GTA 3 kind of in the same breath, because I think GTA 3 popularized what Shenmue was trying to do. Like, I love Shenmue, but it was never going to be, like, the kind of game that people were going to, like, go crazy for. Although saying that, the Shenmue 3 Kickstarter certainly did well, so it impressed enough people. But there were a lot of games in here that I had a great time with that I didn't really go into detail on. Among them, yeah, Jet Set Radio, Marvel vs. Capcom. I always think it's interesting, like right here, you see the Pioneer Project, a plan born of desperation. I feel like a lot of this, there's a little bit of subtext in some of Sega's output at this time that almost acknowledges the kind of the kind of position the company was in, although that may just be me as a Sega fan reading into it. Now, this part here, I knew from the very, like, going all the way back to 2015, I had it in my head that what I was going to do was make as strong an argument as I could for why the Dreamcast was something special, and never, ever mention the PS2 until the end. Like, I wanted to sort of metaphorically twist the knife that everything that I've talked about and everything that I've shown you and everything that this meant to me, like, it didn't seem to matter to anyone else, and I wanted to sort of get across how frustrating that was. Like I say in here that somebody told me that, like, I was talking to about the Dreamcast to somebody in middle school once, and they told me, well, it sucks because the graphics suck. And that really happened. Like, I have one of those really vivid, like, memories of that conversation happening, and of him looking at me just saying, okay, so why don't you like the Dreamcast? And he's like, oh, because the graphics suck. Like, man, there really are people like that out there. Now, this part right here, where I'm playing Beaver Bother from off of Donkey Kong 64 and talking about what I thought of the PS2 at the time of its launch, this was actually something that I almost cut out of the episode, because it just, when I originally conceived it, what I wanted to do was sort of tap into how I felt at the time and how I felt when I was 13, and bring that and sort of, I guess, part of what I said earlier about twisting the knife. So when I originally recorded this part, it was a little bit different. Most of the words were the same, but the way I delivered them was a lot more serious in tone, I suppose. It was a lot more like, people would rather have this overblown DVD player than a Dreamcast. Nah, it wasn't. I'm overdoing it there. I'm sounding. I don't know what I'm doing there, but the point is, when I got to this section in editing the video, like, I played just the audio of that before I edited it, and I was like, this isn't really working, and I'm worried that, like, the tone is off, and I'm especially worried that, despite saying just before that, I eventually did get a PS2, I was worried that I was going to, like, alienate people who feel about the PS2 like I do about, like, the Dreamcast, or people who, there are a lot of people who grew up with a PS2 as their console of choice and who have a great deal of affection for it, and that's fine and that's great, and I didn't want to come across quite so angrily, so I was on the verge of just cutting it. I was on the verge of just sort of throwing something in there. Well, you can imagine how that felt. And fortunately, I posted on Twitter saying I was thinking about cutting it, and I also let my girlfriend listen to the audio. When I let her listen to it, she suggested, well, maybe you could record it to sound different, or you could record it to sound less mad, or something like that. And then somebody, I believe he's here in the chat. He's I don't know if I can pronounce this right, but his name on Twitter is Pirate Kong, and he suggested, well, hey, just put Beaver Bother under it. And he was making a joke, but I tried that, and I was like, okay, you know what? This changes everything. And that's when I sort of, like, realized that that what I should be doing, like, the way that I felt about the PS2 when I was 13 was over the top and melodramatic, and that's something that should be laughed at. That's something that should not be portrayed seriously. Even though, I mean, I still feel like I was making good points. I still feel like the PS2 really was, at the time, almost like vaporware in terms of how few good games it had and how overpriced it was, albeit it was a very cheap DVD player, and that gave it a good leg up. But changing that whole segment to be over the top and to be comical and to be a little bit of a farce really saved it, and I'm really happy with how it came out. And I'm really happy that you know, a combination of Pirate Kong and Alicia sort of helped me think, okay, but maybe there's a different way to portray this. But I want to get back to what was the section that was just playing about the PS2 success in the mainstream. That's something that is really, really strange to think about now, is that at this time, like, what people thought of as hardcore gaming was very, very different to what we think of now. And I think the switch happened about the Switch, not that Switch. I think the changeover happened about the time the Wii came out. But back then, like, casual gamers were the people who basically never played games until they went 3D. They were the people who bought an Xbox just to play Halo. They were the people who, like, you know, played a lot of sports sims. And I mean, that wasn't, I'm not saying that those people weren't gamers, but it was just sort of a different way that things were portrayed back then. But, and by the way, the part where I talk about how the Dreamcast was this glorious dying breath, and then I cut to a zombie from House of the Dead, wasn't even intentional. And neither was this shot, where I say it burned so brightly. Sometimes I just drag something into the timeline and it comes out right. And I also knew that putting the Dreamcast episode here would lead very, very smoothly into talking about Sonic Adventure 2 in the next episode. And by the way, when I was talking about how the system's online functionality is back, like how cool it is to be able to get online with it again, it really is. I mean, the Dreamcast at one time was like the best, like, web browser that I had. And I had to show dkvine.com on there just because I actually originally found them on the Dreamcast web browser back in the year 2000. And because they're one of the few sites whose security certificate is outdated enough that I can still get on it with the Dreamcast web browser. But, like I said earlier, this episode was really, like, for only being 25 minutes long, like, to sort of give you guys an idea and give you a comparison, the Super Metroid episode was edited in a day. Like, I just spent the entire day, and the Super Metroid episode, I think, is about 35 minutes long, and I just banged that one all out in one day. The Dreamcast episode took me 7 days to edit, and that tends to happen because in a case like this, there was so much, like, extra research I had to do to find these old news stories, or to find these old commercials, or to, like, properly source what I was saying. The episode, like, from the scripting process, to the footage process, to the editing process, to the audio process, like, it took an unusual amount out of me doing all that, but I think that's because of what I was saying earlier about really, really, like, wanting to be as much of a perfectionist about this one as possible, and just the fact that I was delving into something that I was very emotionally invested in at the time. So, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I apologize, I know through all that I haven't been paying too much attention to the chat. But I think I can get back to that now. Let me see if I can find a game to play here that I can kind of look at the chat at the same time. Sonic Shuffle. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. Let's just start with this one. And by the way, as far as questions go, I mean, I'll answer this one. I see somebody says, what do you think of the Switch version of Tropical Freeze? I was actually on the Conversation podcast last week talking about that. But I kind of want to keep the discussion centered around the Dreamcast and Dreamcasty topics here. Somebody said, was there a specific reason a ton of Sega and Dreamcast sequels went to the OG Xbox? Yeah, okay, here's the thing. And I always thought this was kind of interesting. So it did seem like after like Sega exited the hardware business, a lot of their games that would have come out for the Dreamcast, like Panzer Dragoon, came out for the Xbox, or Sega Rally Championship, I remember, came out. They seemed to do a lot to support the Xbox. And then a lot of their more, I guess, family-friendly games, like Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, Billy Hatcher and the Giant Egg, Super Monkey Ball, those went to the GameCube. And then the PS2 just kind of caught a bit of everything, as it did, as it did in its era. But after the Dreamcast, I remember Sonic Team. The news made the rounds very specifically that Sonic Team would be supporting the GameCube, and so a combination of that and Super Smash Bros. Melee was what made what made the GameCube my console of choice. Basically all through high school, like all from like 2002 until I got that PS2 in 2005. The GameCube was the only current console I had. Let's see. I'm looking at the chat again, by the way. Oh, I got it zoomed in so much over there, I can't really see much of it. Oh my gosh, it's going so fast. Okay, I see somebody say that the Dreamcast should have had a DVD player. Okay, actually that was a while ago. I see what's happening. The chat on my laptop is catching up. Somebody said that a while ago now, said the Dreamcast should have had a DVD player built in. At one point in the script, I actually had a section where I talked about that. And I said something to the effect of, hypothetically, a way that Sega's fortune could have been different, and that's if they could have had, even if it bumped the price up by $100, you know, what if they had a DVD drive in, like, late 1999, how successful could they have been then? But what I ultimately ended up saying is the thing about that idea, while it's probably true, while the Dreamcast probably would have, like, it makes a lot of sense, because by having a DVD drive, Sega could have sidestepped their whole problem, which was that gamers and gaming media had a very, like, poor idea of their reputation. Like, they could have overlooked all that and, like, captured the mainstream in basically the same way the PS2 did, if the Dreamcast had a DVD drive. But I don't think Sega ever would have prioritized that, because if you look at all those ridiculous, like insane ideas that they used to have, the thing that united all of them was that they would make for interesting video games. Like, Sega was, much like Nintendo is now, a video game company through and through. So I think it makes a lot of sense that instead of instead of including a DVD drive, instead of doing something like that, Sega instead prioritized online, and they tried to push what video games could be forward. So I don't, even though it does make a lot of sense and it probably would have made a difference, I don't think Sega ever would have actually gone for the DVD idea. Let's see. Somebody said, how long in advance did Sega know they'd end the Dreamcast? Yeah, they obviously knew for some time beforehand. You mentioned that Sonic Adventure 2 came out in Japan for the GameCube the same year it did for the Dreamcast. And similarly, Sonic Advance also came out that same year. So no, I think it was in the cards for a while. I see some people talking about Skies of Arcadia, and yeah, there are a lot of games that I know are highly regarded for the Dreamcast that I never played for whatever reason. I always wanted to try Skies of Arcadia, but, you know, funds were limited. Nowadays, I mean, I probably wouldn't go with it too much just because I'm not a big JRPG guy, and I know the game has quite a bit of padding, but I really enjoyed the tracks based on it in Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing. Somebody said, I'm kind of surprised you never actually brought up the Dreamcast ports of fighting games. And yeah, I guess, I mean, I brought up Power Stone, although that wasn't a port. But for the most part, the thing about fighting games with me even though I like them a lot, is that I only really like to, I only really like them in multiplayer. And I'm just good enough at them that very quickly I get so good that nobody wants to play with me. And that I know that I could play online, and when I say nobody, I'm basically just talking about Kalen and just talking about the friends that I have locally, because like online multiplayer, despite how much I talked about it in the Dreamcast episode, you lose a lot in online multiplayer as far as like having somebody that you know there. So, I mean, I had Marvel vs. Capcom. I tried these Street Fighter games. I got Soul Calibur quite a ways after the Dreamcast was dead. But like Soul Calibur is a super, super impressive game. But I guess I never really had the competition to give me enough incentive to actually get into them and play them a whole lot. I had a great comment on the Dreamcast episode talking about Soul Calibur. And talking about how apparently this person who commented was, I think, in college at the time, and just how many nights they'd stay up in the dorm rooms playing Soul Calibur, and like that's the kind of environment that I would love to have with a fighting game. Just something where there's a constant stream of people who want to get better at it, and are pushing each other to get better. I guess that's also why I've played so much Super Smash Bros. Is because that's one of the few games that, like, everybody enjoys playing even when they're losing. At least my local friend circle. What's your favorite post-Dreamcast release? I'm guessing you're talking about, like, the games that Sega came out with in the years after. That were probably in development for the Dreamcast at some point. Let's see, Shenmue 2 only tangentially counts. I really enjoyed Sonic Adventure 2 Battle at the time, although I guess that too is a port. I remember I really wanted to play the Panzer Dragoon game on the Xbox. Somebody's pointing out that it's weird to see this when it's not the DX version. Dustin VG Master says that the only Soul Calibur he's played is the GameCube one with Link in it. And yeah, that was the other thing about Soul Calibur, is that by the time I got it on the Dreamcast, like, Soul Calibur 2 was almost out, and we ended up playing that one a lot more. Kaylin actually was really into Soul Calibur for a while, so I did get pretty good at that one. Got a comment, which is better, Yakuza or Shenmue? You know, Yakuza rather has been on, like, my bucket list for a long time of something that I'd really like to play. The Bird Lady and I were actually in GameStop just yesterday, and I was looking at Yakuza 0. Which I think, is that the one that came out, like, last year that was said to be a really good, like, starting point for the series? In any case, always heard good things about Yakuza, never actually played it. I'm sorry, I'm playing crappy. I keep glancing over to see the chat. Somebody says, which is better, Sonic Adventure 1 or 2? That question will be answered in the Sonic Adventure 2 episode. Although, man, I don't know. In all reality, like, I'm going to try to answer that question for myself in the Sonic Adventure 2 episode. I don't know if I could give you a straight answer if I wanted to right now. I have a complicated I have complicated thoughts on Sonic Adventure 2. It's going to be interesting to try to sort out how I even feel about it. Somebody says, are you playing Adventure 1 or 2? This is Sonic Adventure 1. I'm sorry, I'm sure that while, like, babbling on and answering questions, I'm missing some, but I'm looking right now, so if somebody wants to ask something, go for it. Somebody says, did you mention when the new season will start? No, I said earlier that when I did sponsored episodes, I was really bad about doing things in a timely manner. I always take a quality over quantity approach, and I always Like, I never like to announce, I never like to, like, say, hey, here's when this is happening, because it's not like, I always inevitably underestimate how long something is actually going to take me to get it the way that I want it to be. Yeah, when I refer to a bird lady, I am in fact referring to Alicia, my girlfriend, and I'm calling her that because of her role in the Other M episode.
Yes.
Let's see. Hey Josh, Lantern Engine. Yep. Somebody asks about my thoughts on the Dreamcast controller, and yeah, that's a good. Another thing that Kovar pointed out in the script for the episode was, like, how little I actually talked about the Dreamcast hardware, either the design of the console, like, I know the controller is a pretty controversial thing about it, or especially I didn't say anything at all about the VMU in the episode, which was, you know, something that kind of defined the system. And I did that because, like, at one point I had a little bit about the VMU in there, and then I'm like, you know, I like the VMU so much I could probably do, like, a whole mini episode on it if I wanted to. So I am thinking about doing that. But as far as the controller goes, I know a lot of people nowadays don't like the Dreamcast controller, and I understand why. It's, compared to modern controllers, it's not, it doesn't hold up well, or it feels very different. But, I mean, I don't know. I always liked it. I never had... Like, I don't remember picking it up in 1999 and being like, wow, this is crap. I think it was an improvement on the N64 controller, and I think it was, like, I think it was fine for, like, the contemporary time, like, the Dreamcast came out. Like, a lot of people say, like, oh, it didn't have, like, two control sticks, and that made it, it's very outdated. But you gotta remember, I mean, in 1998, when the Dreamcast came out in Japan, yeah, the DualShock was out, but how many games actually use that? There's actually a really funny review of a game. I think it's on hang on, I gotta GameSpot. GameSpot! Yeah, GameSpot reviewed a twin-stick shooter in the year 2000 for the PlayStation that used basically what we would think of as modern FPS controls, and just spent the whole review criticizing the controls and saying they were so horrible. Because, you know, that wasn't established as the standard yet, and it wasn't really established until Halo came out. I mean, it's... As far as the controller, I mean, it's hard for me to say just because I have so much, like, experience with it and I've been playing it so long. But I don't have a problem with it. I really like the way that the analog stick is designed, especially, at least if you've got a new one, feels really, really good. Gives you a lot of, like, fine movement detail. It actually works quite a bit differently than other analog sticks do, which may also be why people don't like it. Because, I mean, I guess I can see there being a little bit of a... Like, it just feels different from other control sticks. But, due to the way the mechanism's designed. But it's one of those things that I'm really not the kind of person... I can't... I can't be objective about it because it's, like... I just know it too well already. But you could say that about a lot of things I talk about on the channel. I never pretend to be objective. The stream is stopping? Is everything okay? Oh, somebody asked about the second screen for the controller. And by the way, speaking of the controller, if you notice at the very beginning of the episode, the close-up shot of the controller, like, is actually a European controller, and you can tell the difference because the Dreamcast logo on it is blue. When I knew I was going to be playing a lot of Dreamcast games and capturing a lot of footage for this episode, like, one great thing about collecting for the Dreamcast is that a lot of its games and accessories are still very easy to come by, and pretty cheap for that matter, like, even brand new. Like, you can still get brand new VMUs for, like, $10 to $12. And of course it has some rare games out there. It has some pricey games, but a lot of its library is pretty easy to find and very affordable. So yeah, I got a brand new European Dreamcast controller, which I'm playing right now, and yeah, it feels great. Let's see, I see somebody asking about what did you think of the Game Grumps playthrough of Sonic Adventure. You know, I know that a lot of, I'm obviously very, like, aware of what's going on in the Sonic fandom. I know a lot of people have a very poor opinion of Ego Raptor and of Aaron Hansen, and they feel like he just sort of brings down the reputation of the Sonic series. But look, I don't fault anybody for having an opinion about things. I don't think, obviously I don't think he's playing up the way he feels about it. I do wonder. I mean, I could see them, for the sake of comedy, going out of their way to make the game look a little worse than it did. But I wouldn't say that that's necessary. I mean, Game Grumps is entertainment. It's fine. I do find it interesting the way that criticizing... how do I put this? The way that a popular YouTuber lampooning something like that can sort of set the bar for how it's thought about and how it's talked about. I love Sonic Adventure. This is a game that, I've gotten a whole lot of, more affectionate for as the years have gone on. And, I can take off the nostalgia goggles, I can see the flaws, they're pretty blatant in a lot of cases. But, I don't know, I still have a really good time with it. But, I can definitely see, even at the time it wasn't for everybody, even at the time there were people who said that Sonic Adventure, and Sonic Adventure 2 for that matter, were very, very poor games. And I wouldn't say that those people aren't, worth listening to just because they're criticizing something that I enjoy. I don't think that's, a healthy way to have a discussion or to have an outlook on things. Ah, yes, okay, the controller screen, sorry. So the screen in the controller actually isn't, it's actually removable. If you search on Google for VMU Dreamcast, you'll probably find a picture of it. That is actually the system's memory card. And you slot it into the controller itself, and it provides a second... I mean, in some games, it provides a second screen. But it did a variety of things. A lot of games, like this one here, had little mini games that you could load onto it because it has two buttons. It has a controller, or it has a control pad. It wasn't at all a powerful handheld gaming device. It was only black and white. It had very low resolution. But there were mini games that you could load onto it, and that's actually why the A-Life system in Sonic Adventure exists at all. That's why we have Chow. And I think I'll go to the Chow Guard, and that'll let me keep up with the chat more. Somebody said, who else never beat Sonic Adventure because of Big the Cat? You know, Big the Cat gets so much flack. And I understand why. I understand that it's not, of all the things in this game that... Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles in Sonic Adventure 1 do a good job at feeling like cohesive parts of a Sonic game. Amy does a little bit. Amy is is still a recognizable offshoot of that. E102, I guess people give a pass to because it's still an action game, and it's still pretty fun, but Big the Cat just doesn't have anything in common. Big the Cat's gameplay doesn't have anything at all in common with what we think of as a Sonic game. That being said, his levels are so short and so easy that, I mean, in the Dreamcast version you can't skip cutscenes, so it'd take a little longer, but I can get through Big the Cat's entire story in about 15 minutes. It really doesn't bother me. Game Arcade, I've seen your question come up a minute ago. Okay, well now it's scrolled off the screen again. Okay, you say, how come older games run at 60 FPS but modern games for graphics over FPS and most FPS have 30 FPS, and it's still scrolling. Come on, gotta scroll back up. Well, Sonic Adventure 1 actually does run at 30 FPS for the most part. There are preview videos for it that show it running at 60 FPS, so they were trying to get it there. And then Sonic Adventure 2 runs at 60. I mean, there's been a lot of, like, discussion about the fact that modern games, modern console games specifically, tend to run at 30. And, like, the thing that I've heard, and by the way, here's the station where you would send your chow to the VMU. But, I mean, the common thing that I've heard is that, I guess, when I played Sonic Adventure originally, let me take this to myself. Let me use myself as an example. You know, when I first played this game, I didn't know the terms 60 and 30 FPS, but I definitely noticed like the difference between playing this game and playing something like Super Magnetic Neo, the game that I talked about in the video where you're playing as like a robot with a magnet in his head. Because Super Magnetic Neo did run at 60 FPS, and I noticed that. I noticed it was smoother. And then when Adventure 2 came out, and, you know, like, how much faster it was, and how much smoother it was, and how much of a greater sense of speed there was, I really noticed it. But I guess the thing about it is, until, like, if I only ever played this game at 30 FPS, I wouldn't miss 60 FPS. But having played it, you know, on the DX version, and especially the PC version, where you can customize it and make it look like, and make it, you know, like, bring back the Dreamcast textures and everything, which is an awesome project. It's called Dreamcastify. There's a blog out there that details all of that. But anyway, the point is, I guess 30 FPS is something that you kind of get used to pretty fast in a game, or at least most gamers do. And until you experience that same game at 60 FPS, it's not really something you miss. And I also know that, you know, like, graphics, like, the fidelity of graphics is something that you can get across in a screenshot. But the fluidity of a game isn't something that can come across that way. So I think it's just something that a lot of people aren't aware of, and that a lot of console gamers just never notice, and, you know, it's not something they really care about so much. And I see somebody saying 60 FPS is only really essential for racing games, fighting games, and strategy games. You know, I hear takes like that a lot too, but I feel like it comes down to the individual. I feel like there are some people for whom 30 FPS is unacceptable. It's not immersive. It's not as fluid. Like, I agree to an extent that, like, depending on the genre, it may be more or less important. I feel like a high-speed game like Sonic does benefit a whole lot from being able to have a high frame rate. But I think that a lot of people on either side of the argument about 30 versus 60 FPS tend to treat it as if they're, like, they don't seem to acknowledge that other people are going to have different preferences than them. And I'm saying this as somebody who loves frame rate above all else. Like, I will turn down every graphics setting until I can get a high frame rate. But I understand that not everybody's like that. I understand that some people, like, I guess what I wish is that more modern console games would give you the choice. And I know that the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X do it sometimes, and that's great. I wish that more games had a feature where you console games specifically, of course PC games have it, where you could turn down the graphical fidelity to get a higher frame rate. I always loved this part right here. I always remember being so impressed by this. The day that I got the Dreamcast, the first thing I did was put in the demo disc and then fire up Sonic Adventure, even though I'd gotten Sonic Adventure with it. But, you know, I wanted to try the demo disc. And, like, having the whole first section of Emerald Coast be, you know, very, very spectacular, that was great and all. But then to come down here into Act 2, what's essentially Act 2, and this part right here where the level's designed in such a way that you're going to run up the wall and you're going to see that, like, the physics still allow you to do that in 3D. God, that was cool. Like, I remember just running back and doing that a couple of times. I think that's one big difference that I'm going to be talking about between Sonic Adventure 2 and Sonic Adventure 1. Is that Adventure 1, in a lot of ways, still feels like it's being built. Albeit it's not polished. Albeit it runs the way it does and has plenty of glitches for it. but it still feels like it's being designed with the ethos of the classics. It feels like it's like a lot of it is still trying to be what a classic Sonic game would look like in 3D. Let's see. Somebody says, why do you think Sega doesn't seem as adamant about re-releasing Dreamcast games like Skies of Arcadia? Well, if you're talking about Dreamcast games in general, it's probably just the price of porting them. Like, it's one thing to be able to slap a Genesis ROM in an emulator, but you know, to properly do a Dreamcast game justice, you're gonna have to put a lot more work into it. For Skies of Arcadia specifically, I admittedly don't really know enough about that game to give you a good answer. Like, I know, didn't it get an enhanced port on the GameCube at one point? So, I don't know. Now people are arguing about Sonic Adventure 2 versus Sonic Adventure 1. I think I'm going to play Casinoopolis and then switch to a different game. Yeah, I see Shay talking about the waterfall bit at the beginning of Emerald Coast. Yeah, I remember, Shay, I remember it was your video that taught me that I could do that that shortcut at the beginning of Emerald Coast where you jump off the bridge and like time it right to gain height off of it. Like, I recently loaded up the test levels for this game, and they have a lot of, like, loop-de-loops that don't, you know, that aren't like most loops actually are in the game. You know, where it's like a set path, it's a spline, I think is what they're called. I don't know that for sure. But you can see that they were trying to get the physics to work, like, without pre-scripting at this point. And, I mean, they didn't do that. But I always enjoyed, like, in the video on the Dreamcast episode, I talked about how much time I would just spend running around adventure fields, and in fact, let's just go do that. And I didn't even like put the pieces together as to why that was so enjoyable at the time, but it was because the physics engine was still in there, and because like I remember I could just like get on a ramp and like jump at the right time and rocket up really high. Like in Sonic Adventure 1 compared to Sonic Adventure 2. Like, there's so much more that can go wrong with it. There's so much, like, less polish to it. But the flip side of that, and the reason for that, is because Sonic Adventure 2 is a much more structured game. So I feel like Sonic Adventure has a higher skill ceiling, albeit that means that, like, the experience, until you get really, really good at it, is going to have, like... Or until you get used to the very, very strange physics of it, like, a lot more is going to go wrong. But yeah, I remember I would just, like, on this mountain here in particular, I would just, like, run around this and charge up a spin dash and, like, see how much height I could get. Let's see, Chica Shroom says, saw your Dreamcast video and it inspired me to buy a Dreamcast. That's really cool, and I hope you enjoy it. Although, do keep in mind, I've seen a couple of people say that, like, oh, I gotta go get a Dreamcast now. You know, just keep in mind what era it came out in. I said earlier during the commentary for the episode that one thing that I really wanted to get across in it, and one of the unique things I felt I could bring to it, was to sort of encapsulate what it was like to own a Dreamcast at the time, and what it meant to me at the time. And I don't think that you can necessarily get that playing it now without the context of what it was like then. If that makes any sense. But I did actually, like, back in the day, I did convince, like, quite a few people to get a Dreamcast, because I remember, like, I'd have friends come over and I could like, show them Shenmue, or I could show them Sonic Adventure 2, and I could be like, yeah, but the entire console, not the game, the console is $50. And that was a very, very easy sell. To tell your parents, hey, this is a whole game console that can play games that look like this for $50. As pooped by Anakin Skywalker? I don't understand what that even is. Did somebody donate $2? I'm not sure. Phantasy Star 5 on the Switch, can it happen? Oh, somebody's asking about Dream Pie. Okay. I didn't go into the technical details in the episode because I just felt like it was outside of the purview of, like, a nostalgic look back at the Dreamcast. I didn't want to get too, like, hammered down in the details of video converters and that sort of thing. A Dream Pie, the reason it's called a Dream Pie is because it's based on the Raspberry Pi computer, which is this very, very small computing board that I think the newest version of it goes for about $30. So yeah, it runs on that. You've probably more commonly heard about it as the Retro Pi, because a lot of people, including myself actually, get them and turn them into like emulation machines, and they can basically emulate everything up until the PlayStation 1 with a very good degree of accuracy, and that's a lot of my retro game footage over the past year or two has been from the Retro Pi. Anyway, with the Dream Pi, you need a Raspberry Pi, which, you know, like I said, retail goes for about $30, $35. And then you need a line voltage inducer and a dial-up modem. Because what you do, the Raspberry Pi has like 4 USB ports, and so you plug a USB modem into one of those, and then plug that into the Dreamcast modem. But it was very easy for me to set up. All you really need is like a USB keyboard to plug into it to like connect it to your Wi-Fi one time, and then like I've just got mine hiding in my entertainment center. So nonetheless, I mean, if you don't already have a Raspberry Pi, like to get that plus the modem is going to be about $70. And, you know, that's a pretty high price to pay, you know, just to play some Dreamcast games online again, especially if you didn't grow up with it. But I would say that on the bright side, you know, having a Raspberry Pi is a really cool thing to have anyway, because you can set up a Retro Pi on it. Excuse me, TGC, do you know of a place where sailors hang out?
Sorry, dear. I'm busy right now. Ask again later, okay?
Oh, freaking love Shenmue. Okay, you didn't waste $4. Phantasy Star 5 on the Switch, can it happen? Okay, well, I guess anything is possible. I feel like at this point, actually, Phantasy Star Online 2 is out on the Switch in Japan. You guys might have heard in the news recently that they've been talking about Resident Evil, the newest Resident Evil game. I think it's 7, isn't it? I've played that game, I should know. But anyway, Resident Evil 7 is like a streaming game on the Switch. So, like, the game runs somewhere else, and you stream it, like with PlayStation, like the same way PlayStation now works. But of course, it's only in Japan. And Phantasy Star Online 2 is also on the Switch in exactly the same way. I know Japan. I have a friend who actually is teaching in Japan right now, and their internet speeds are a lot better than ours. So I guess they can do things like that. But yeah, you did. I didn't even know that you could donate money through YouTube like that, but you did spend $4, so I will give you the answer. Phantasy Star Online 5 for the Nintendo Switch is confirmed to be happening. You heard it here first. Let's see. I'm looking at the $70 Dreamcast Online is greater than $60 year of Xbox Live. Oh, there you go. Yeah. And I'm actually going to be getting online with the Dreamcast here in a bit. I thought it'd be fun. Maybe somebody watching has a Dream Pie. Or maybe I'll just randomly find somebody on PSO. And somebody saying, yeah, you could technically, like, create an a Japanese account on the Switch and buy PSO2 that way. But I really, really doubt it would be remotely playable streaming all the way from Japan. Nonetheless, I was a little bit tempted. But I you know, if you don't know, Phantasy Star Online 2 came out in Japan, God, like more than 5 years ago now. It was announced that it was coming out in the West, and then it just never did, and Sega never talked about it. And I really, really wish it had. Nonetheless, I mean, you know, there's fan-made translation mods, and you can play it, but obviously it's not the same experience as like an official release. We need custom SA1 levels so we aren't playing Red Mountain 30 times in a row. Oh man, I already played Red Mountain earlier, didn't I? You know, that's something that I don't think I got into in the Sonic Adventure 1 video that I did a few years ago. Like, one thing that I'm really noticing about it, and really remembering about it in the process of making this episode, like, I really could play this game for hours on end, just because of, like, I guess kind of like, something I could compare it to would be like Overwatch or TF2. So in TF2, in a game like that, basically, if you're not doing well, or if you're getting a little bored of a character, there's so many other characters that you can switch to. And Sonic Adventure 1 also had a lot of variety in that same sort of way, where, like, I mean, obviously, I played Sonic more than anything else, but it was always one of those games that I could, like, load up and think, okay, well, I could go do this, I could go work on these emblems, I could go, like, you know, raise Chow, I could go play this minigame, I could go to, you know, there's just a lot to it. Yes. The whole game is like muscle memory for you, yep. Alright, I said I'd switch games a while ago, though, so let's do that. What should I put in there? Oh, how about this? Since I talked about how much the emulator left a lot to be desired in the Sega Smash Pack, let's show you what I meant by that. Another thing that I always knew that I wanted to, like, feature in the Dreamcast episode was that anecdote near the end about reading the, about the introduction in the Sega Smash Pack. Because I'd never, like, that had such a big effect on me at the time, and I'd never heard anybody else bring it up. Somebody's asking, do you think it'd be better to get original copies of games or just to pirate them? Well, you know, at this point, it's not like you're going to do any damage to Sega. I mean, it's nice having original copies, it's nice having your own library, but some of those games are very, very expensive, so I personally wouldn't feel bad. As far as piracy goes, like, I didn't bring up piracy in the episode at all. I know a lot of people blame it as a very big, as a big part of the reason the Dreamcast failed, but I don't think that it really had all that much to do with it. So the Dreamcast was very, very easy to pirate. You didn't need a mod chip. You didn't need any hardware modification at all. There was just a certain way that you could burn a disc, and you could run it natively. But like, the thing is, in the following years, of course, yeah, Dreamcast piracy would become rampant. But before the system, like, before the system was discontinued, you know, CD burners in the year 2000 were not prolific. And plus, if piracy was that big of an issue, ooh, are we back on yet? Are we back on? The Sega pirates got him, yes. Yeah, I don't know what happened there. OBS said that it stalled out or something. Okay, good. Alright, what I was saying is, I feel like if piracy was that big of an issue for the Dreamcast, then you would have seen people... You would have seen the hardware sales go up. Like, people still would have had to buy the hardware in order to pirate the software, and you didn't really see that. And in addition to that, I think the PlayStation 1 was also pretty easy to pirate for. I remember knowing a kid who had just this spindle full of burned PS1 games. So, like, I'm sure that Sega lost some software sales due to piracy, but I don't think... But if that whole thing wasn't there, I don't think it would have saved the system by any means. And, in addition to that, it's not like I don't know if I said this before, but I don't know if the stream went down when I said this. It's not like CD burners were that widespread yet in the year 2000. Certainly in the years, in like the 5 or so years after that, they became very, very widespread. But hey, let's talk about the emulator used for the Sega Smash Pack. See if you can identify the major problem with it. And I think my thing went out. I seem to have lost connection for a second. Maybe the sound was so bad that somebody... I'm not getting any picture and I don't know why. Okay, I know you guys aren't getting a picture. Can you still hear it? And if you can, I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm typing. I know you can hear me. So, Kenny Green says, wow, Sega couldn't even bother to emulate the video output of the Genesis, so you have to play Sonic 1 by sound cues alone. Okay, I'm gonna fix this. If I can remember how to get to the, there we go. Okay. What? So you guys can still hear the god-awful sound, and you can hear me, but you can't see the video. I assume you can see that. I think I need to reboot the capture device. Albeit I don't quite know how to do that, but let's try this. Yeah, I don't think that's going to work. It just wouldn't be one of my streams without catastrophic hardware failure.